Hey guys, this is Roni K95 here. Time for another movie review time. And today's movie review, when I think of how I wanted to come by for a movie, I wanted to do something, is very more simple as well. When it comes to how I think of spaghetti westerns, you know, the ones like, for example, like the Django movies, as well as the Man with No Name trilogy with Clint Eastwood. Here is the movie, but this is basically got into my case, though. Well, why am I bringing this up in the spaghetti western thing? Well, today's movie review, here is a movie that I wanted to do a movie review that makes me want to start to become a movie reviewer. And at this one I wanted to cover for today's movie review is the one and only, for today's movie review, They Call Me Trinity. This movie was released in 1970. They Call Me Trinity was directed by Enzo Barboni, and this movie stars Terence Hill and Bud Spencer, which this is the vastest majority of how, before we get into the plot in the movie. So, for the thing about how Terence Hill and Bud Spencer made the success for the Trinity movies, ever since they did dark and serious spaghetti western movies like God Forgives I Don't, Ace High, and Boot Hill, even though I've already did my movie review on Boot Hill. They also did the other movies later on as a pairing after the Trinity movies throughout the 70s and the 80s, which is a lot different, not really complicated as well for that. So let's begin with the story in the movie They Call Me Trinity. So this movie starts off with Trinity, who is a lazy cowboy who's riding on the back of the horse through the desert as well when they wanted to travel through. So that's how he wanted to go, by just because he's tired and lazy. They got back to a way station and a restaurant as well when he was hungry for some beans and bread, and they always knew that he realized that he has never eaten food that he has never seen in his life, and they wanted to know basically how did he get here by the travel by the desert as well. So Trinity basically carries an injured prisoner away from those two troublemakers as well, and then he shoots the two troublemakers before they shoot him first, before thinking. So Trinity carried an injured man who is a prisoner to the nearest sheriff's town, the smallest town down in the west, particularly when he encountered that he sees a sheriff who is large and burly as well, when he fights off those other blokes when they watched. And this man is named Bambino, played by Bud Spencer himself. Trinity and Bambino were basically two brothers as well, especially of how he gotten a hold of this prisoner, as how they got to the point of how it seems to the reasonable thing for how Trinity has a lot to do when he has gotten a hold of a prisoner, how Bambino had a lot to do, especially when Trinity told Bambino that he'll see him later, but Bambino was not even happy of how the troublemaking that Trinity caused. He says, "No, you're not going to see me again," because he was not happy at all. And to the top of this as well, and for some reason, is that he basically wanted to know that there was some when the major, who is the sheriff, and Trinity noticed something of how there was a fight going on in the bar with these horse thieves who are always bringing up the trouble at all costs, of how this happening as well. And on top of that, this is how it was until Bambino has to fight off these horse thieves that were those bullies that are causing trouble in the bar as well, especially in a salon looking place as well, for just to consider the fact of how, if they would have noticed, especially of how the true thing is as well, despite though that his gang barely escaped as well, when his basically of how, despite that, Bambino was never happy to see his brother, who is a troublemaker, or when they have a deal with Major Harriman, who is the pacifist of the farmers who are Mormons in that movie as well, off of their land, of how they graze of the horses, of how they're valuable, explained of how despite how Bambino's grudging willingness to work with his brother, which he considers Trinity to be a bum with no ambition. When Trinity has fallen in love with one of those two Mormon sisters, was genuinely concerned with how the settlers' welfare, when he pursues Bambino and his henchmen to help train those pacifistic Mormons to fight. When the Mormon leader found in the book of Estes in the Bible, that where he explains that there is a time for fighting, when Mormons unleashed against Major Harriman's goons, which are these local troublemaking bullies, especially, of how this goes on, of how they ever really wanted to know, for what credibility of how, just to consider the fact of this as well, of how they use the dirty fighting tricks, where how they learn. Bambino was infuriated when he knew that Trinity has given Major Harriman's horses to the Mormons, when Trinity was happily married about these two Mormon sisters, of how he's learned that being married to the Mormon, actually, how it explains of having to work, causing him to hurry, which is how this goes, which is before Bambino angrily sends him off in the opposite direction, where Bambino tells Trinity that he is going California, and he sent, because he was not even happy with Trinity at all, when he tells Trinity that he is going east, especially because he was not even happy with Trinity at all in this movie, particularly, of how, which is in the opposite direction, that he's going east, before Bambino is departing for California in the west as well. But then Trinity went to recline to his travois, on bringing up the rear with the horse. So he also follows Bambino to California when he's departed on the back of the horse as well. So that's how you end this movie, when when he's following Bambino to California in the direction for his depart. So that's the story in They Call Me Trinity. It's very well made, and it's not even that complicated, though, especially for a typical Western comedy like They Call Me Trinity. So I think this basically how it's got to the point as how this movie has gotten the biggest thing for a typical movie as well. And it's basically, this movie was basically how it's composed by Franco Michelizzi, and this movie was released in Italy in December 1970 as well. And they're basically how it was filmed in Lazio, Italy, with the financial, how it's from West Film, how it goes. So, Howard Thompson of the New York Times explained about the rumor, how the first sense of humor, and film critic Roger Ebert gave the film 2.5 stars, of how, just to consider the fact of how this goes. Yeah. This movie was released before Christmas in Italy. I mean, this isn't no Sergio Leone movie, but it was close as well, as from what I understand particularly of how this goes, as this movie has become more popular with the success of how when this movie was released in Italy before Christmas in the 70s as well. It's not that very complicated to how this truthful thing is that how, despite that, They Call Me Trinity is basically the first in the Trinity movies as well. And it even had a sequel, which is a follow-up to the first one, which is Trinity Is Still My Name, as how, basically, how, this basically, how I come by for a film of this, how it's been outgrossing all of the other spaghetti western movies, except for A Few Dollars of More, which ironically, for A Few Dollars More, is the Clint Eastwood movie in the Fistful in the Dollars trilogy. For the Trinity movies, however, I mean, this has become a biggest success for every filmgoers who hasn't seen any of the Terence Hill and Bud Spencer movies, and particularly though, and they even had a third Trinity movie called Sons of Trinity, which they wanted to count as the continuation of the Trinity movies. But apparently, the Trinity movies are the only two, like They Call Me Trinity and Trinity Is Still My Name, which I think those are the only two Trinity movies that star Terence Hill and Bud Spencer as well. I mean, this movie basically has it in its own setting of Western, but I know there's some comedic moments on there, which is almost to the extent to other Western movies in the 70s, such as Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddles. And for the thing of how, if you could find basically no more for the fact of how, basically how, there's some of the things as well of how, and not only that, this movie has got the good production for what Enzo Barboni had a lot to do for, especially of how he wrote the story and the screenplay for the movie, of how they wanted to include the character Trinity instead of Bambino, which how they originally wanted to do this film of how I wanted to come back an eye on this one as well for a certain amount of topic, which is like when they were basically how they originally wanted to cast George Eastman and Peter Martell, but instead they don't want any part of it, so they had to choose Terence Hill and Bud Spencer to play the role as Trinity. Well, Terence Hill had to play the role as Trinity, and Bud Spencer has to play the role as Bambino in that movie, particularly for what considered the fact of how if Enzo Barboni had a lot to do for this movie, especially for a spaghetti western comedy like They Call Me Trinity. And this movie was also released in the United Kingdom and the United States of America in 1971 as a release date, particularly. Then again, just to consider the fact of how it's more different from the first previous spaghetti western movies, which was part of the Giuseppe Colizzi trilogy, what Terence Hill and Bud Spencer did, as well as Terence Hill's other spaghetti western movie in 1968, where he played the role as Django in Django Prepare a Coffin as well. Just to consider the fact of how it really should be all of this surprisingly, but it all comes in surprises for the Trinity movies on here, which They Call Me Trinity has got the attention the most. Yeah, because in Italy, this movie has a success in Italy as well, and this has got, so I might take it that's a good thing for how this movie has gotten a success, which ironically, Trinity Is Still My Name is more success than its previous predecessor, which is the first one. Yeah, we'll get to that in good time. What do I think of the movie, They Call Me Trinity? I really loved it, because I wanted to consider, I love the story. The characters have some of its moments on there. Every character that are always something to be added in this movie, especially for a film for a change, as how it all comes for its own leaps and bounds, particularly for a movie like this, as how to a certain amount of topics as well. Especially for a film like this, despite that's given in the fact of how this has gotten to be a lot of success for the Trinity movies, as how, just to considering how Terence Hill and Bud Spencer had a lot to do when they made work as a duo in this movie, besides the previous film Boot Hill, which ironically Boot Hill was part of the Giuseppe Colizzi trilogy as well. I mean, think of it. I mean, when they originally released Boot Hill in the past, they were basically cash in under the name as Trinity Rides Again, but it wasn't part of the well, technically it was part of the Giuseppe Colizzi trilogy, because They Call Me They Call Me Trinity and Trinity Is Still My Name is part of the Trinity movies, like the first two, which I'm not counting Sons of Trinity, which I don't know why they counted Sons of Trinity as a third continuation of the Trinity movies, but technically Sons of Trinity never featured Terence Hill or Bud Spencer after their last movie together was Troublemakers, which was later on in 1994. But They Call Me Trinity is part of the Trinity movies, particularly for this movie on that. I mean, I just love, my favorite scenes in the movie is where Trinity and Bambino were fighting off those punching and fighting the horse thieves in that movie. That how they wanted to kick ass in that movie as well. Especially if you have seen one in a spaghetti western movie, as how, particularly of how this goes, how I come by on this, just to consider the fact of this movie, how this goes, as for the thing as that. Note the self for future reference, as how I guess. And for the thing of this, yeah, because for the movie like They Call Me Trinity, I think I love it. And the location, however, for the filming on here, like the waterfall scene, I think it was filmed at Treja Valley Park. The stage station was shot in the Magliana Quarry in Lazio, Italy. And some of the valley locations were filmed in Parco dei Monti Simbruni, which I think is somewhere in Italy. The interiors in town and the towns were filmed at Inclier di Poli Studios in Rome, Italy, as well. Yeah, for the production for the movie, like They Call Me Trinity, Terence Hill and Bud Spencer had their own stunts for the movie, of how some of them hired stuntmen for how they wanted to do for the movie on that as well. Yeah. So this explains why, as how on its own certain movies, of how the film's popularity, and also the Carambola series, which featured Terence Hill and Bud Spencer lookalikes, which are Antonio Cantafora and Paul L. Smith, who's known for the live-action Popeye with Robin Williams in the Carambola movies, which I think it's like a parody of They Call Me Trinity movies on here. I think this happened through the popularity of the film They Call Me Trinity, and Trinity Is Still My Name as well. Which I think those are the first two Trinity movies as well. Just to come by on this one as well. And the theme song, the title of the song for the film They Call Me Trinity was sung by David King, which is billed under the name as Annibale, which is on one of those Italian soundtrack releases. And they used the theme song that opened for the film They Call Me Trinity, also used in Quentin Tarantino's Western movie, The Django Unchained. But on top of this, the story is excellent, very superb. The characters are excellent on here. The filming locations is awesome, including Campo Imperatore, which is also later filmed on in the sequel Trinity Is Still My Name, which is later on in 1971, and the movie filming location for the film Lady Hawk, which is directed by Richard Donner, which is later on in 1985. And this is basically how there's some filming shots where they use for the Trinity movies, like Campo Imperatore and the movie studios in like Lazio, Italy as well. Especially for those interior film sets on the filming locations as well, as how you wanted to come by for a movie for a change like this as well. And for overall, if you want to binge watch on something like for a film like They Call Me Trinity, highly recommend you to check out this movie. If you have it on DVD or Blu-ray, give it a watch, because this is the great example of spaghetti western movies from the 70s, what Terence Hill and Bud Spencer had a lot to do when they made this movie. And also, They Call Me Trinity was the 22nd successful Italian film, one position below The Good and the Bad and the Ugly as well. And my score for the movie They Call Me Trinity, I'll give it a 10 out of 10. Why not? Because I'm going to give this movie a 10 stars on as well. So that's going to be it for my movie review on They Call Me Trinity for today's movie review. Thank you for watching, but before we go, here's what I'm going to say for this one on this video. Looking back on my previous movies, where I reviewed a couple of Terence Hill and Bud Spencer movies like Go For It and Boot Hill, They Call Me Trinity is the one that definitely takes the cake for a good, simple movie review, because I wanted to do this movie that I haven't done a movie review on They Call Me Trinity until now, because this is going to take the cake. Ever since I reviewed a couple of the previous Terence Hill and Bud Spencer movies in the past, this is going to get you covered for a movie review as well. Hope subscribe for content. My Anime Planet link in the description down below. Share this video on your Twitter and Facebook if you have Twitter and Facebook account, and all the social media. Smack the like button if you enjoy this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below on this video as well, if you like as well. If you want to check out my Anime Planet, link will be in the description down below. If you want to check out my Anime Planet account, because I have a huge backlog of manga and anime on my Anime Planet account. And also, Patreon link will be in the description down below. Be sure to smack the like button if you enjoy this video. Click on the subscribe button. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, RuRoniK95. Feel free to join my channel, especially if you're new to my channel as a newcomer. Smack the notifications bell button. Be sure to get notified also as well for more latest updates on here as well. And that's all I have, what I got for to say. Wow. This is the first time I wanted to do a movie review on They Call Me Trinity for the first time for a new movie review. That's why. This is RuRoniK95 saying thank you for watching my video. I'm glad you liked it. I hope you enjoy it. Hope to see you soon for the next video. Hope you have a great day. This is RuRoniK95 signing off, and thank you for watching my video. And I will see you soon for more videos. Take care. Bye.